right, good evening, everyone. How are you doing? Good, good, good. Thank you for coming out to our third event in Journalism Week. This panel, what I hope will be a lively discussion and not a Q&A to wait for you guys to talk at the end, but for us to be in conversation and community with each other throughout the event for this conversation around the crisis in journalism. My name is Nicole Carr. I am a visiting assistant professor here in the journalism department at Morehouse, and this is my 5th year with the college. Came on board in 2021 as we expanded into a journalism major in sports culture and social justice. And I've also spent my career in journalism. I'm going to introduce each of our guests here, and I really love this conversation. I've intersected with you all in one way or another throughout the career, and you all are really in for a treat. There's, I don't know how many years of experience, whatever. This is wisdom. This is wisdom. This is wisdom before us. We'll begin with Leroy Chapman Jr. Really needs no introduction. He is the editor-in-chief of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution and the first Black journalist to hold the newsroom's top job in its 157-year history. Prior to this promotion, Leroy was managing editor where he directed the newspaper's daily print and digital news gathering. You also worked with us in television and all our collaborations. So in another lifetime, Leroy and I worked together between WSB and the AJC. He's had a variety of editing and leadership roles at the AJC since arriving in 2011. And during his tenure, Leroy has been among the newsroom leaders who transformed the AJC into a more efficient, digitally focused breaking news and digital operation. We know we are cutting print soon. We're going to be talking about that.
Yes, we are.
During this conversation. And under his leadership, the AJC reporting teams have won local, regional, and national journalism awards for local news, business, education, and politics coverage. As EIC, Leroy is leading the AJC's transformation into a modern media company as it invests in digital storytelling, podcasting, and documentary film. Next, we have Aaron Haynes, the newly elected president of the National Association of Black Journalists. And I knew she was gonna win, and I tapped her for the panel before she won, and I did. I manifested the victory in her presence here. And she is also the founding mother and editor-at-large at the 19th. So Erin is an award-winning journalist with more than 2 decades of experience covering the intersection of race, gender, culture, and politics. She is a founder of the 19th, a national online publication focused on gender and politics, where she works as editor-at-large, and she's also a political contributor at MSNBC. In August 2025, she was elected president of NABJ, continuing career-long leadership and recognition in the organization. Prior to joining the 19th, she worked for the Associated Press as a national writer on race and ethnicity, and you were based here for that, correct?
I'm based here in Philly.
Yes. She's also worked for the Washington Post, Orlando Sentinel, and Washington Post. We're going to talk about the Post tonight too. The LA Times, and in 2022, she received the Journalist Leadership Award from NLGJA, the Association of LGBTQ Journalists, and she helped to launch and recruit the funding for the 19th Frances Ellen Watkins Harper Fellowship. It's a groundbreaking year-long fellowship program for attendees of HBCUs, and there may be a student in the room who is a fellow. Do we have one of the 19 fellows in the room?
Not yet.
Not yet, but we do have them at Spelman. And last but certainly not least, Dr. Robbie Morganfield, who's the executive director of the Ida B. Wells Society for Investigative Reporting, which we are happy is housed here at Morehouse. And shout out to the Ida B. Wells staff here in the back of the room. You all check out the programming that is available through this organization. Dr. Morganfield was a former award-winning daily newspaper reporter and editor who currently serves as the ED of Ida Wells Society for Investigative Reporting. He joined the society after serving as an endowed professor and chair of the Department of Journalism and Mass Communication at North Carolina A&T State University, where he successfully led the department to its first full accreditation. Prior to that, Morganfield was the Cleo Fields Endowed Professor and head of the Mass Communication Department at Grayling State University. Okay. Professor Ford, shout out. He's worked for newspapers in Fort Lauderdale, Detroit, Tulsa, Houston, and Fort Worth, serving as a reporter, editor, and columnist at various points, and he taught courses in intercultural communication at the University of Arkansas, St. Augustine's University, University of Maryland at College Park, and Trinity Washington University. Please give our panel a round of applause. All right, we're gonna jump right into this conversation with, I really believe in defining what we're talking about before we jump into it. So I want each of you to talk about what you believe to be the crisis in journalism. I believe this is one of perhaps not meeting the moment, where our framing of issues is normalizing a crisis in our nation, a global crisis. There's a crisis for the safety of journalists. We can go on and on, we'll talk about all of this, but can each of you tell me what that means to you?
I will start. So I think the first crisis, though, is that we have a moment that we're meeting with just objective truth. So our democracy is dependent upon objective truth. I've been raised in this business, and my job every single day was to lay out facts. I spent a little bit of time as a columnist, but mostly it was to go and bear witness and come back and say, here's what happened in your community, in your government, and out of that, decisions were made. So the crisis for us now is that objective fact seems to not matter as much. We have folks who are in high elected office, a presidential administration, and folks who are running our government. And part of the struggle now for all of us who are covering the decision making is that the factual part is challenging. There's misinformation, and sometimes the president himself is led by misinformation, and also in being able to speak directly to the public to say, do not believe the media. Not only that, but it's the other part that's a crisis. It's basically having the government actively fight the media in terms of access, and also just the daily information war. And so that is going on this day. So it makes our jobs more difficult, but we have to beat the law. And what the moment means is that we have to be diligent. We have to be courageous, because part of this, I think, the strategy is to get us to maybe not work as hard, to maybe not approach the job with the same sort of, I think, in this job, you have to be a couple of things. One of them is that you can't quench her. And so this is about not quenching. This is about being faithful to what our charge is. And look, the most patriotic thing that we could do is stand up for the First Amendment. And this is a moment that's going to be defining. History is going to look back at it. So I know that's a lot, but you're trying to define it. There are a lot of things. Our business is contracting true. There's a business model out there that we're trying to get our arms around. True. So we have to make sure that we can comport with consumer habits and technology. That's important. But the real thing is really about, you see, that's the thing. So it's not just Mika, it's our country that's in crisis. And so anytime you're talking about losing objective truth is fundamental for our democracy. That is the definition of crisis.
Yeah, plus one definitely to everything that Leroy is saying. First of all, when we say happy to be here at Journalism Week with all of you. Happy 100th anniversary to Leroy and Tiger. Shout out to you all. I love Leroy and Howard. And I love Morehouse. My grandfather, James Haynes, was a coach here for many, many decades and was also a student athlete here. So always happy to say yes whenever an invitation comes to the house. But yeah, I mean, look, I think it's exactly as Leroy said, that this is a crisis that is intersectional, right? It is a crisis of truth, it is a crisis of democracy, and it is also a crisis of diversity, right? Diversity is under attack as well. And so when you have the confluence of these three things, right, and an attack that is being led at the highest levels of our government, right? This is a president who has said that the press is the enemy of the people, right? And he was saying that long before his second term in office began. So there's a straight line from that kind of rhetoric that gets repeated and then baked in to a society, to a democracy. When people begin to believe that, that definitely is damaging to the health, right, of the press. And without a healthy press, you do not have a healthy democracy. But without a representative press, right, as part of a representative democracy, that's how we get to a crisis. And so that is the moment that we now find ourselves in. We came into this year where we saw attacks on diversity, equity, inclusion, and that has rippled across institutions in this country. And journalism has not been immune, right, to that ripple effect. And so you had institutions capitulating, whether that is, law firms or academic institutions or media institutions, right? And so we have seen that happen, certainly in my beloved profession, which has had a reputation for standing up, in the face of attempts by the government to, try to cower us. We have said no. But this is a moment in which we do not find enough actors willing to say no across institutions, but also particularly concerning in journalism. And so that feels like a crisis, even as we know that there's so many rank and file journalists and newsrooms across the country who are trying to fight the good fight. And that does include so many Black journalists who are trying to do their jobs with integrity, with professionalism, and whose stories are being questioned, are not being greenlit in this climate. That is not good, because what that means is that you do not get the most honest and accurate record of who and where we are as a country in this moment. And that's the crisis, right? Because the work we do is not just for right now. It is for the people coming behind us. You look around at the people on these walls, the stories that they tell, the stories that the lives that they lived. We would not know many of those stories but for the work of journalists, the work of Black journalists, right? To tell the truth about who they were, what they contributed. We need people to come along 100 years from now to know about what this moment meant. And Black journalists are just such an essential part of the American story. So to see the erosion of those voices, that is what is front of mind as a crisis for me and our profession.
Well, I would echo everything that's been said. I think as I thought about this from the perspective of the Ivy Well Society, reinvested in accountability reporting, and at the core of all that is narrative, and I think that's where the struggle is. What narrative is being presented to the public, and how is it being presented? And we see an attack on historical narrative as well as contemporary narrative, and particularly as it pertains to Black people, our story. And so I think a real struggle is for us to maintain control of our narrative and not allow someone else to assign a narrative to us that suits some sinister purpose that they may have, but doesn't really capture who we are as a people. And so we see it from the standpoint of the museums are under attack, and then logically the press is under attack because, again, part of our job is recording history, telling the story, helping people to understand what's really going on in the world. And more that's coming under attack. And so there's always been some level of antipathy toward the press, I think, where nervous could think it's evolved to animosity. And it's aggressive, and it's purposeful. None of it is by chance. It's very intentional, and it's coming from the highest levels, of our nation. So I think that's more and more of the reason why we as a people, I think, have to be resolute in our determination to make sure that, we stay the course, that we tell our own stories, and that we not allow someone to control that. And then I think also with that, we have to figure out a way to enhance the Black press and give it more teeth and strength to be able to really to stand and tell stories. Great to have people like Leroy and others, in high positions in legacy media. But part of the growing challenge there is this oligarchy in terms of these people owning these youth organizations now. Once upon a time, that would, people owned newspapers and didn't really interfere in the storytelling part. But more and more we've seen that line being blurred. So I think this conversation tonight is very important, because I think more and more, not only be dealing with misinformation, but we're dealing with disinformation, which is slightly different in terms of its intent and it's and the impact that it can and does have on us as a people. So hopefully this conversation will stir all of us up and encourage us, and stay on the front lines and fight in ways that we can.
I'm glad that you talked about disinformation versus misinformation. We have a third wheel to that, and that's malinformation. And the intent is very clear. People who are spewing it know what they're doing, and it is meant to harm. And I think you have a problem with framing that in terms of our federal government and the person who holds the highest office of the land. I'm glad we're talking about the historic collector, let y'all know what that is. That is my thing, our thing. One of the most important things for you all to know is that we have been here before. We talk about representation, but we've owned our own media and we've worked in various roles before. In fact, we originated those. We talk a lot about Ida B. Wells as a first data investigative journalist, although we're not represented in that way in newsrooms. You have Charlotta Spears Bass, who took on the Klan and exposed a whole lot to, bring down leaders in the Black community through the California Eagle. You had Charles Loeb, who was reporting for the Atlanta Daily World and exposing the truth about the atomic bomb and the US government propaganda around that the New York Times just comes around to apologizing for their dis, and malinformation that they reported during that time and discredited members of the Black press. So we've had investigative journalists through the years. And Robert Abbott combats censorship when in the South, the Chicago Defender is banned from southern cities. So he teams up with the Coleman Porters and it says, hey, you all throw out the Defender because you're the only Black people with access to the country from coast to coast.
Nicole, you're making such a good point, because we have been the trusted messengers, Black journalists, and particularly a Black press. We have a tradition of being the trusted messengers in our community, and we have been showing up in our communities. And so now it is time for our communities, for Black America, to show up for the Black press. I mean, I'm somebody who got my start in the Black press, right down the street on Auburn Avenue at the Daily Well. I'm so glad you mentioned Charles Loeb, because what we learned, in places like the Daily World was that our stories matter, right? Whether it was speaking truth to power, righting wrongs, afflicting the comfortable, or just telling the full story of Black people in places like Atlanta, small business owners, city governments, whatever the case may be. The Furner Commission said the failure of legacy media was that we were not covering the totality of Black life. That is what the Black press does. We have yet to fulfill the recommendations of the
Furner Commission
all these years later.
And America's story. So you don't have a full truth about America without the historic Black press. So where I'm going with this today, what I want us to talk about is kind of the framing of the moment that we're in. A lot of what we're talking about, we're still kind of leaning into this game day coverage of politics, right? That the right does this, the left does that. The Republicans think this, Democrats think that. Here's the truth, but this is where this person falls on the truth without reiterating that is not truth. that an election is not stolen, how do we address the ill framing? You all who are in my class know this saying that facts are non-negotiable, framing is a choice. Why do we continue to make our framing choices in a time of crises? And I'm not asking us to, I'm talking in a general sense. I don't see what's happening right now as political. I see this as racial. I see this as life or death. I see this as living in a democracy or not. So where do we go with the training, the practice, the leverage that we hold in our spaces to ensure that we're not normalizing the crisis in front of us?
Well, look, I mean, that is why representation matters, right? When the stakes are liberally existential for folks, right? For women, for people of color, for LGBTQ plus people, for people with disabilities, folks who have been historically marginalized in this country, you're going to have we're going to bring a different lens that frankly was an asset to your journalism, to your storytelling. We started the 19th because political journalism was too male and too pale, period. So what do we do about that? We started a newsroom, which is not the solution for everybody. There are legacy of institutions that have to do better, right? But it matters who the decision makers at those legacy institutions are, who understand that if we are not telling a full story about this country and the communities that make up this country, that is journalistic malpractice, right? That is not just a moral imperative, right? Or even an economic imperative. Like, this is bad for journalism when you are not doing that. So I think a lot of it, let's just be honest, white comfort, when we don't want to tell the full truth about certain things. Some people don't like to confront what the truth is. We are in an age, to your point, of erasure and exclusion, right? So it is more important right now, or as important as it has ever been to tell the truth and to be clear-eyed about that. And folks who are living through a lot of that reality, literally on the receiving end of a lot of these executive orders, telling their stories, that matters right now. That really matters right now. But yeah, that framing, who's up and who's down is really not the point of this. Really not the point of this right now. When, like I said, this is literally existential for folks. What this is gonna mean, or Democrats or Republicans in November, is just, that is not the right question to be asking.
Or did you want?
I think one of the great challenges is that we're in a time in which whoever can talk the loudest, and I think what you see particularly from the conservative movement right now is they want to talk over people. And even when they claim to set up situations where it's going to be a conversation, they talk over people.
And up for committee, but an outrage.
Yes. And so I think part of our challenge, and as well as the opportunity, is for us to really dig a little deeper and figure out how we create platforms where our truths can really truly be heard, and be heard in context, and heard repeatedly. Because, we all know that hearing something once is not enough. And so what they mastered is the art of saying stuff over and over again. And they say it so much until they start to want to believe that it's true, even though they know a lot of times it's not true. But I think we have to figure out ways that we create access. There are a lot of journalists still who are doing great work, but is that work about being seen? It's not being read. It's not being accessed by the public in ways, that people really connect with it. Then that's another part of the challenge. And I know, coming from a newspaper background, that was one of the big challenges we were facing that Leroy was changing around us. Trying to figure out how we stay, because we had the corner on the market for a long time. And then little by little, it slipped away from us. And then we were kind of standing there trying to figure out, what do we do now? And I think the newspaper industry in particular is still struggling with that to a large extent. So I think we've got to figure out how do we create platforms and the new generation coming up where they relate and communicate in ways that I think we need to incorporate more into what we do so that we get the information.
That's what I thought. It sounds like a Leroy.
But okay, so here's some of the good news. So we talk about some of the luminaries of journalism from the past, right? In order to be the entry to get it to publishing, that you had to have some money. You had to say Subai Impact Barrel. You had to, that we're walking away from print. Well, what that means is that I'm no longer in the manufacturing business. I'm no longer in the transportation business. I'm about to start papers across a traffic clogged metro area. I say that just to say that the traditions of what was, that's not what there used to be. And so we are wanting to live in the future. And the future is this, that the entry point into journalism now, the cost is virtually zero. If you bought a new iPhone right now, that camera is just as good as a camera that used to cost $10,000 not too long ago. So if you're talking about Harry Whitney, you can go with the iPhone. And they'll give you one, it'll get you go and get you an account at your favorite mobile service. That's right. So virtually, you're talking about being able to have the equipment to broadcast the world in your pocket. So the question is, what do you do with it? And the comfort of having a corporate job like what I grew up in, there are a few of those, but the opportunity to be able to take your excellence and to broadcast it to the world, there is no barrier to that for you. And excellence and speed will win. And when I say speed, I mean, there are moments where being in the conversation matters. But let me tell you something about truth that also matters. Truth is slow. It's deliberate. It takes a lot of work. You got to sweat it out of people. It's all of that stuff. But truth requires that. And the people who are the merchants of truth understand it, and they operate with that kind of resilience, right? And patience and effort. What we're, as Dr. Wardaville is alluded to, we're operating though against the light speed of folks whose intention is not truth. It's misinformation. It is to keep making the point that they keep wanting to make, especially ones who want to make a point about race. They will find any issue there is out there, they will make an issue about race. I don't know how these folks don't get tired with my Lord. They don't get tired, sleep, none of that. I don't know what they own. They own it. See, let me tell you, it always shows soccer. So what I'm making is this, is that while traditional media, and whether that's television, so with the idea of appointment television, we got a bunch of kids in here. So most of y'all probably even home to. That's okay, my kids though. We bond for them and they'll leave for the term on, So television in the future of that is gonna go the way of folks who grew up with it, and we get about it. The folks who will inherit this are going to consume information differently. And so this is not just journalism, it is also tech. Understand that where I am now, where I used to be in the trucking business, it used to be in the manufacturing business, now I'm in the tech business. And so that's where you are. That's where the opportunity is. So yes, it's challenged. No, it's not going to be what it used to be. Or what's to come, though, is something that is available to you. And look, it's also this thing, too. So we built something called UHL, and here's why we built it. We know that we have the advantage here because Atlanta is a chief exporter of Black culture and Black diversity. And so what that means for us is that scalability. So guess what? There are things that happen here that are of value to people around the globe. That is also where you can build scale, money falls. So understand that. Now, does that mean that the next Bureau of Labor Statistics report is going to get the same attention as, I don't know, Beyonce getting a Sojak over here at Croc City Market? Probably not gonna do the same traffic numbers, right? But if you build the right kind of audience and you understand that maybe people come to you because you told them about Beyonce getting a Sojak, maybe you can tell them something. If you know your audience and if you're authentic, if people see you as being an authority, you can then tell them about how Black people are being affected in this labor market. And so I deliberately bring that part to como content. here's the crisis part two, and I mentioned a few earlier statistics. So the president decided to fire the person who is compiling the data because they're not. And the next report comes out, cellulite. So we understand now, 8 months into the administration, 8 months into the administration, that the idea of being able to rely on what's coming out of the government, that when you talk about disinformation, malinformation, we're in a new era now. That is unprecedented. The norm is, so these are the things that we have to deal with daily. Well, that happened and we moved on. And no one's talked about it. And I used to be a business reporter. I'm still stuck on it. I'm like, well, how are we gonna do our job? So again, we're in a different era. But I think that's the other thing too, is that we have tools now to be able to pay attention to all of it at once. Because we don't have to rely on the traditional media like where I am working and where Ernie's working, to actually do all of this stuff. The work is too vast and the moment is too big, it's gonna be false.
You know, speaking of the reliability of information, and this really goes into audience trust as well, right? Because whatever we're putting out, I mean, we can't afford to be wrong, right? Because the odds are stacked against us already. What type of reporting skill do we need to send our young journalists out with in order for them to, and I actually do think about oddity wells in this way, because there are mainstream and government reports that say the lynchings are happening for XYZ reason, and she goes out, boots on the ground, and begins to collect the data to correct the record. What are we training them for? There's going to be a lot of record correcting happening, and that requires different skill sets. I always think we should look at journalists as not only, I mean, I do endorse the journalism major, but your engineers, your data folks, your math folks, your history, your poli-sci folks play a part in this storytelling.
America's best.
Yes. So what is the journalist of the now, in the near future, and forevermore look like compared to what we've come up with?
I think it has a couple of parts to it that really needs to be considered, because, you know, as I was listening, I was thinking early, you know, all information is not good information. It's sort of should be self-evident, but often it's not, particularly in this era of social media. And there's not, sometimes I just kind of scroll through social media feeds and I see certain things getting posted, and to see the number of people who are responding to stories that are absolutely false. Sure. And they, you know, they taking it in, you know, and people are sharing it and saying and going on, going like, wow, they're it's almost like stuff that's being planted for clicks because it's salacious or it's, you know, has some element of conflict or whatever that tends to draw people's attention. So I think we have sort of like two sides of the road. On one hand, of training journalists, but also educating the public. And I think that's the piece that we sometimes not focus on as much as perhaps we should. That people have some basic media literacy and to understand you can't just run with everything that you see because it's interesting. And you claim it and believe that it's so, then you're sharing it and it's going around. And so some part of that, I think we have that task as well as training. I think the techniques that journalists have used are very sound when they're done, you know, the way they're supposed to be done. And so I think, you know, we stay with what works, but I think we also have to look at how do we convey it? How do we relay it to the public in ways that the public is gonna eat it, they're gonna take it. So I think that's one of our bigger challenges, but I'm all for the traditional training, you know, facts, verified. You know, when I was at J school, they said, your mama tells you she loves you, verify it. Check it out. You know, don't assume that it's so just because it's being said. And too often, that's a problem in our society. Just because someone says something doesn't make that true. And, you know, particularly now, you know, we see that on in this campaign to kind of dismantle democracy or free press, where people just say stuff and they just keep saying it. And they know the power of saying it. And oftentimes they know most people don't have the time or the information to check it out. But I think we have to train the people to check stuff out. And that's for our journalists as well as our consumers. We gotta do a better job. Don't really have a full answer to how we do it. Rather, I think organizations like AABJ and others, we have some responsibility to get back to maybe at town halls, having workshops, other kinds of things that we get provided to people to help them know what they can trust and what they should.
Yeah. I mean, what I would add to that is that, absolutely, we have to be rooted in the craft. I mean, those of you who are aspiring journalists, being rooted in the craft, but also understand what the craft looks like now, right? It is not what it looked like when any of us got into the business, despite having done it all. But yeah, I mean, I have to say, as somebody who started as a print journalist and now, is a contributor on MSNBC, I cut a podcast, I basically will go anywhere and everywhere to tell the story of the work of the 19th, because that is the work that is required now. Like, we have to meet audiences where they are. We cannot assume that audiences are going to find us. I mean, we have an old page, but I don't know how many people are going to that or finding us from the homepage, right? But they may find us because of our Instagram account or our TikTok account, or because they saw me on a panel somewhere interviewing Kamala Harris or something like that. Whatever it takes, right? Whatever it takes. And I will also shout out UATL, because I love it, because y'all are outside it, right? I mean, not only are you very online, but you're also outside. I'm at a Dream game, here y'all are. I'm on the Beltline, here y'all are. I mean, I love that for us though, because I mean, that is not the Atlanta Journal-Constitution that I grew up with. But y'all understand, I mean, double down on Black folks, double down on Black Atlanta, because Atlanta influences everything. So why not harness that to gain trust with a Black community that has not always trusted this institution, right? That matters. That matters a lot. So understanding that the craft looks very different than it did, but you still have to be rooted in the craft to do this work and to become that trusted messenger. Trust is earned. We do not at the 19th believe that we deserve anybody's trust, right? I mean, we're only 5 years old, and we work to earn that trust each and every day. The other thing, to your point, being rooted in a working knowledge, a healthy knowledge of the history of this country, getting that now. I can't tell you, my colleagues, right, are having to get up to speed on the history of this country, the history of race in this country, the history of gender in this country, right? Because all of that is the unfinished business of this democracy that is playing out in our politics and our society right now, right? So if you don't know that, then you cannot write about these things on the continuum instead of as happening in a vacuum. None of this is happening in a vacuum, right? All of this is part of a very long playbook. There's been success on us that is seeking out because of a lack of information, knowledge, and people not really recognizing what they're looking at. So as journalists, to connect those dots for people, to make meaning for people of this moment, you need to understand where we've been and how that bears on where we are now. That is so important.
So, in order to do that, you need to be in the room to influence that conversation, which brings us back to this whole diversity topic. We, as an industry, really have not done well over the years since we integrated newsrooms. Because if we're still hovering at that 6-7% across roles in AIM's room, Black-led, mainstream, whatever, we don't exist. But you do exist. And your ability to tell stories do exist. And before we go on with the diversity point, does anybody want to jump in? Because I said I didn't want to wait until the end of this to talk to you. Does anyone have anything that they want to ask or say? Yes, Elijah. I think so. You can project, okay.
So, my name is Elijah Qualls. I'm a junior political science and journalism fellow nature from Columbus, Ohio. I'm one of the best Carr students this semester and last semester. So my question is, when we're looking at the AJC going more digital, is it the general when we're looking at going more digital in the journalism field to meet our consumers? I have a couple concerns when I hear that. First, I think about access, right? When we're looking at people's access to technology, it's not widespread, right? So being in my position, I have certain privilege destitute out of the cell phone. That's not necessarily the case for a lot of people who still deserve that access to the truth and to information that So that's my first kind of concern that I was hoping if you could address. And then my second one was what it looks like in limiting speech when it's purely online parties, seeing how digital documents can be completely removed or taken away, they can be altered. And so my question is, do you have any concern about how the free speech is going to be affected as we become more and more digital and things that is taken down or removed or blocked through those kinds of channels?
Let me answer the first question, and thank you, Elijah from Ohio. Yeah, there you go. So the access issue is one that we're certainly sensitive to, and being able to have libraries and other places where you can get free and full access to the agency was important. We have some of that. So that printed record that we used to have, we won't have in the future, but we will have access for that. The other thing too, in terms of thinking about, I think an important thing too, which is access to broadband and what it means in our communities. It is growing. There's still some places where that intersection between government and I think the self-interest of companies that need to get that out. It's a growing thing. There are pockets in the state where it's still a challenge, but I think we've grown tremendously from where it used to be. So I think if I were comparing, who has a cable subscription or who can go and get a subscribe to newspaper, I know that the ability to be with full log on, that has far greater penetration than anything we've had before. So I think that the digital reality that we live in and where we're going means that more people will actually have access to the AJC and the kind of reporting that we do. Not only that, I mean, it gives you access to what's going on in New York or Philly or LA. I mean, that is something that if you are for a certain age, connotation rampant. When I was growing up, we didn't have it. We had to work hard, to see what was in the New York Times or in the Billion Wire, and so there's that access now. And I think that our industry is sensitive to the idea of making sure that everyone has it who needs it. And again, our democracy is built, so we want to have a well-informed citizenry because our democracy needs it. That second question about censorship is fraught. And here's why. I mean, we've got an administration now that is looking to, I shouldn't say that, I wouldn't even put it all in administration. We have Congress that certainly has the ability to begin to regulate some of this. And I don't know what kind of stomach they have for it. Because the politics of it is going to make a real fraught conversation, right? And then you got some of what's going on now with these companies that own big media platforms. Often they have other businesses that are regulated by government, and that sometimes too will have some influence on what happens and what doesn't. I will say this, there is one thing that is very democratizing about media platforms is that it's not just American, it's global. I think the idea of censorship really is probably going in the opposite direction, whereby I think there is a point of view of this administration that moderation is censorship. So here's where we were. When we think about what happened post January 6th, there was deplatforming of people who were funding violence, right? So among them was former resident, and took them off of Twitter after 6 people may recall, and YouTube, right? And so there had been, with some previous administrations, a point of view about social media platforms having a responsibility to limit speech that was inherently violent and can't call it, you're right, incited violence. And also too, there were standards, big standards that included race, explicit sex and things of racism, things like that. Well, we have an administration now that's looking to, basically take the government out of that business. So I don't think that we're going to have a problem necessarily with censorship. I think we're going to have a problem with social media platforms being awash in the kind of things that's objectionable material that keep people like me from off of it, because I can't go on Twitter now without it being racial assault, really be what's this. So I think we're actually trending in that direction.
Absolutely. And listen, Elijah, those are great questions. I also want to make the plug for nonprofit insurance, which I helped to start one of. And we started the 19th as a nonprofit newsroom, partly because we knew that we were centering, again, people who've been historically marginalized. And what does it mean to cover those folks, to write more about them if they were to have access to our news, right? So all of our news is free to consume. It is also free to republish. So what that means is anybody, any news outlet can republish stories that are unpublished on the 19th. As long as you give us credit, it's really easy to do that, right? We're entitled to republish 19 news if you want to, right? And what that means is that, even in print publications in the middle of the country, right, where somebody doesn't necessarily have access to news about the intersection of race and gender, or identity and politics, they can publish those stories. Maybe they know it's a 19th story, the person reading it on the bus or on their way to school or whatever, maybe they don't. But the point is they're getting the information. That's what's important to us. And so what that means is that because we are not asking the readers to pay for our news, we are asking other people to support that news, whether that is public or private philanthropy, or whether that is just everyday people that are getting $19 a month to keep us going because they believe in what we're doing. That is really, really important to us. So if you believe in local journalism, if you believe in nonprofit journalism, support that journalism because it really is important. The press is free, but if this work ain't free, we need to do this for free, so we need your help. But I do think, the digital security piece is very important. And at the 19th, we have certainly, this year, we have had to pay a lot more attention to shoring up our digital security because of the kinds of things that we write about. That makes a site like ours a target, right, for folks who do not want us putting out this kind of journalism. And so what does it mean to be thinking about that right now as part of how we do this job? Yeah, it's absolutely a concern. And in our scenario planning, we do think about, how might we to give it, right? If 19 needs that word goes done, how are people going to get the news that you produce, right? Like that is a reality in the reality that we are in.
Big concern for me is that I think we still have work to do in disabusing the public, and particularly a segment of our own community, of the idea that it doesn't matter. And I think there's a lot of people who, do experiences, observation, whatever, sometimes feel like your forces don't matter, they can't really influence things, and so they just accept what comes. And then the idea that all sides are equal, so it doesn't really matter who's up there, it's the same thing. I think we have to, in some kind of way, figure out how we get people to stop doing that, because we're seeing in real time that it does matter. And to what extent, perhaps, you could argue that, but it does matter. And so I think some kind of way, as an educator, I think about how do we educate, again, the public, and particularly Black public, to recognize the power that we have. And sometimes I don't think we live into that in the ways that we need to. We saw with this Jimmy Kimmel thing recently how when people decide, no, we're not accepting that, it makes a difference. And people start canceling subscriptions, they start hitting people where it hurts. And, within a few days, the whole story changed. And I think too often we just take it, and we don't come together in ways to say no. we're not gonna take this. You know, someone posted online, I mean, you know, why was there the same response to Joy Reid when she lost her position in that's NBC, you know? And so that's a question that falls to us in many ways, and I think we've gotta figure out a way that we are able to marshal our resources and get our people collectively responding and reacting to things in ways that do compel the forces to hear us. Along with that, I think, I've thought about this too, is that how do we, you know, you're talking about your organization goes dark or whatever, but I also think that some part of it is how do we bundle our efforts in a way to where people are able to get the information, you know, and maybe there needs to be more collaboration among publications, particularly, you know, ethnic press, to figure out a space that people can go to and get both their local news and their national news. Because we have resourceful people, we have smart people doing the work, but sometimes accessing it still is the issue. So that, I think that's a conversation that needs to be had among those of us in the industry, figuring out how do we, you know, is there a repository, you know, where we can go and find these kinds of stories, this kind of information, and knowing that it's vetted and that it's trustworthy. And I think we have some opportunities to think about that, and technology really gives us a great opportunity to really capitalize on that.
You know, I want to come off of something that Leroy said. You said couldn't get on X without the onslaught of racial slurs. I don't think we've been very open or honest about the experiences that have come along with covering, because that's a very common experience for Black journalists, and the higher profile you are, certainly. I want to talk about the protection of journalists in doing this work. The targeting of journalists is clear, and it's been ongoing for some time. My mind is going back to the onset of the big lie. You had local journalists right here under private security for months that you would never know about. How do we protect one another and also have the courage to cover the United States as we would a foreign nation? If we were observing what is happening here today, it is easier for us to analyze, to send resources, to talk about what it means to be a beacon of democracy or a Western leader and force that, you know, denounces what's happening. But I don't think it's so easy for us to denounce what is happening here. So how do we protect each other and instill the courage to do the necessary work to submit a record of truth?
I'll start with this. I think we got to have each other's backs. So I have the advantage of working for the company that security, when we need it, we get it. That's not everyone. But the one thing about when you talk about the folks who have done the hard work is that there is endless examples in our history where journalism has never been a safe space occupation. It is not today, but historically it's never been. There's always been risk. When you speak truth to power, you say things or uncover things that people don't want uncovered, there's risk. So that risk is going to happen all the time. Now, the other thing too, when you put the issue of race as it comes up, there is some protection too. That's where it may not be physical, but it is the other part, right? It's just the mental toll that it could take when you're online and you've got folks who are wanting to demean you, grade you. It's funny, I'm telling my children too about, online bullying and that sort of thing. And let me tell you, when I got on Twitter and then folks started calling me fat, I felt some kind of way now. I felt more, some kind of way about that more than the racial stuff. I'm like, you call me fat. but we're human. We're flesh and blood, and we've chosen this profession, and with an understanding that these are safe spaces. And the folks up here, we've all probably been in situations where we had to have our feet on the ground in places that did not feel safe. So I know that, if you're going to check into this business, if this is what you're going to do, there's going to be a little bit of that. But I do think that if you're working for a legacy media publication, make it a priority. You need to speak up. And if there's ever anything that's happening along those lines, make sure people know. Do not suffer in silence to take this. Secondly, looking after each other is important too. One thing about the mob that comes for you, there's a counter to that too. You've got a support system that can certainly come to you too and come to you and render aid. So that's the important thing to me, which is why it is important to have some people like Erin, who is sitting her job as a fierce advocate for Black journalists. I mean, journalists in general, but especially Black journalists. So absolutely. So she is capable of helping to bring your friends along if you need your friends, because I know if I need her to ride, she's gonna ride.
Right.
That's
Go ride
right.
day and night.
So
I'm sure he right.
no.
But if they start being racist, let me know.
Okay, I would do that. And then I think the last thing too about that, I'm glad that you younger people really, again, with the little help target. This is a job that exacts a toll, and I think you have to be mindful of it. Take care of yourself, and that means this job can be consuming, but then there's light by side too. So we'll touch some grass, we'll have some balance, we'll do those things, because there is a toll and you do not. And I suggest that everyone find some, because I'm going down that hole too, and it ain't no. So you should find a balance.
All excellent points. And let me just say, I mean, y'all are so much better about recognizing, calling this out that our generation was. I mean, I have somebody who has been reporting on race for the better part of 2 decades. Sure. And at the beginning of my career, when I was writing about race and getting love letters from the public, I thought that was part of what came to the job, right? And so I did, I wasn't saying anything. I was just like, okay, well, enough, he's calling me the A-word today. And, another witness, I'm the N-word. By the way, I didn't like you look sick, or your hair was off today, or whatever. I'm like, no, it wasn't. It just went late, but okay. Don't say that, even though you're gonna call me an N-word, right? But, I mean, it really was, the 2016 election where I got an email, I'm like, oh my God, I'm showing my white colleague this email, like what this person wrote to you today. They're like, have you shown this to security? I'm like, what, the security?
Right.
It's Wednesday. Like, what are you talking about, right? But they recognize that maybe this was something that my higher ups need to be aware of, that had not occurred to me. And at that point, I've been doing this job for the better part of a decade. So that you all recognize that racism is not okay. It is not a part of what needs to come with you all just trying to tell the truth in public, which is what journalism is. That's not okay. Even though you get a direct deposit every 2 weeks, it's still not okay. That's not the price that you should be paying. That's not the tax that we should be paying, to do our job as Black journalists. And so I also say that to say, our newsroom, one of the most diverse staffs in the country. Mostly women, mostly people of color, queer folk, we've got locally trans people on staff. All of the people that are under attack in this country right now work in our future. And so what does it mean for these people to be living the stories that they are covering? One, it means we need to keep them safe so they don't have to worry about how they do their job. They just need to worry about what story am I going to tell today. So a lot of the money that we raise goes to security for our folks. We're proactive about that. Scrubbing your information from the internet, making sure that they are using the right protocols when they are using our email, when they are operating online. And if something does happen, if somebody is doxxed, immediate intervention, right? If somebody's being attacked online, get that person off the line. There's a team of us that will monitor your accounts, right? To see, you don't need to read those messages. You don't need to take that in, right? We intervene on that person's behalf. These are things that, as a newsroom culture, we believe in doing and that we are doing for our people so that they know if you give it to me up there, right? Because that is not, that certainly wasn't my experience, before I came to the 19th. It was like, well, we'll wait till see it. Let us know if something happens to you. and we'll see what we can do. I decided, like, I don't want to wait for something to happen to me. You know, I'm not going to Trump rallies. Like, what do you do? So that was important. That's important. It is important
To expect from the institutions that you are working for and on behalf of, right, that they are going to keep you safe in doing this job.
But the mental health piece of this is absolutely essential. I'm so glad that you brought that up. Because this stuff does take a toll. I mean, I'm somebody who covered everything from Trayvon Martin to Ferguson to Mike Brown. I mean, Mike Framingham first, to George Floyd. Like, if you are not processing this as a human being and not just moving on to the next story, like, it does show up. So shout out to non-therapists. If you are, in a newsroom, take advantage of your benefits when that happens, because this work does take a toll on us. We are living the stories that we are covering, all of us, all of you, right? The things that we're covering are things that could happen to any of us, and that's real. And so, yes, take it to the group chat. We have a lot of gallows humor in the group chat, but also therapy is good. Meditation apps are good. Going outside is good. All of that is also very important, because, yeah, we need you whole and healthy to do this work.
I'm gonna head that while Dr. Morgan builds process.
I was just going to add to that. I think more than ever, we are all being called to lean more fully into history. We're in this room right here, and you look at these walls, these individuals, and the kinds of situations and circumstances they faced in their time, and the lessons that we can learn from their experiences, I think, are more important than they've ever been. And I think we owe it to ourselves to either educate ourselves or re-educate ourselves about these stories, because we're in a time where, frankly, we're being called upon to determine who we are and what we value. And I think, to some extent, we've never been a people who've been challenged and I heard Nicole Jones say this in a conversation we were in not long ago about the whole idea that literally you might have to die for something that you believe in. And that's not a thought that many of us ever consciously, I think about, and certainly don't want to have to think about, but I think we are living in times in which we do, because the truth is nowhere is really safe. Crazy stuff happens every day in places and spaces that once were considered safe spaces, and they're not. We saw that just a few days ago, people in a church, again, and that's happened several other times, but, I do think we're being called upon in many ways to look inward as individuals and decide who am I? And what do I care about, and what matters? And what am I willing to give to fight for that? Because it is a fight. And we can act like it's not, but it is. And and there are people who are intentional on wiping us out. You think about the fact that African Americans are 13% of the population, and sometimes you would think we're 90% of it, because every time something comes up, some other conversation always winds back to us, and the attack always seems to be aimed at us. So I do believe that we as a people have to make some very personal decisions, to do some inward work and say, who am I? What do I care about? What do I value? And what am I willing to do to live up and live into that? Because it's just a reality. And I don't think it's something that we can take lightly.
Good evening. My name is Noah Cathy. I'm a sophomore at Morehouse College, majoring in the journalism of social justice with a minor in sociology from Dallas, Texas. I want to ask about two kind of unique problems that I think are interrelated in a very specific way. Back around time in Dallas, as I said, and I remember when Cumulus published MLA with ESPN, and that kind of acquired all the local networks. I'm from Dallas, so we lost Free to Galloway, Airtime, The Simmons, etc. All the local stations, same in Pittsburgh, Minnesota, LA, the like. And they cut the local station and local reporters into some like national news with such a thing, like ESPN's going national, right? And that was, at the time, the Clintons, if that was a choice made for corporate interests, like for national corporate interests, I think it's very similar now with a president and FCC that is business driven. The same things happening with satellite stations, like with Kimmel, for example, where stations were cut and then reinstated because of national local interests, right? And so as these local stations with little power or leverage, and then you work AJC, and so you probably have experience at least with pressure from national organizations, but adopt this, I don't know like what the actual term is, but almost this like enveloping into this larger entity in the name of corporate business and now government interests, particularly, or the fears are for the industry and how that might compromise the variety of journalism that's maintained at a local level.
Yeah, Noah, you are right to be concerned. Local journalism, the erosion of local journalism is real. The consolidation of media right now is real. And this is absolutely a concern. It's a concern for AABJ because we're worried about what that is going to mean for our members, what that is going to mean for diversity, and for folks who have been trusted messengers in so many of those communities, right? Where with consolidation, there's going to be overlap, right? Which means somebody's got to know. And usually what we know is, so many of us who are the last ones hired, first ones out the door. So now there's less representation as well as, fewer folks in the building. I also want to include public media in this, right? Because the attack on public media is also an attack on local journalism in rural communities. And by the way, Black folks are in rural communities. We know that, right? That is also often the only local trusted source of media for so many people in this country. So for public media to be going away in this moment too, for a lot of those places to have to shutter because funding has been cut for no other reason than that the administration is hostile to public media. That's not good for the profession. That's not good for democracy. It's definitely not good for these communities. So we have to continue to speak out and push back. When we see this consolidation happening, we have to talk about what the stakes of this is for everyday folks who rely on that trusted information and the folks who provide it and who those folks are, continuing to put a light on that and why that matters.
Hello, my name is Emily Kate. I'm a sophomore Maskey arts major with a concentration in radio, television, and film. Attending Clark Atlanta University, and I'm from Prince George's County, Maryland. I'm also a member of ABJ since freshman year.
How many people are like Emily in the room? NABJ member? Yeah. Not yet. Okay, we got yeses and not yet.
NABJ is like the best organization I've joined since being in college. Okay. So my question is, I believe Ms. Taines talked about how the most trusted messengers in the media industry. So how do we Black journalists preach about a broken democracy and broken press without our voices being shut down?
NABJ's gotta have your right, as it do. I mean that, I really, really mean that. It is the reason that I ran for president because 50 years ago, 44 mighty founders of this organization came together and said, we need to speak up for Black journalists to make sure that our voices are included, to make sure that our voices are not silenced, and to make sure that we are part of telling the American story. And so that is the work right now. You all should be able to still do that work, and when you do it, you should know that there is an organization that is going to have your back when you do it. So, for me, I certainly came up when I was where you are. NABJ was there for me. I knew that if something, if in the course of me doing my job and telling the truth in public, somebody tried to say that was not okay, that NABJ was going to say something. And so we should still be that, even 50 years after our founding, for folks like you who are trying to do that now, which is, it is as important as ever that you understand that your lived experience is an asset to your journalism. It is not a liability. Nobody should be allowed to say that it is, right? Nobody should be able to say, that diversity, equity, and inclusion, which used to be American values, part of what made this country better, right? Suddenly that is not something that we value in this country, and certainly not in journalism. No, we don't subscribe to that. To Nicole's point, when the Kerner Mission came out, that report came out in 1968, 5% of all the journalists in this country were Black. Right now, that number is 6%. It's only moved 1% in 50 years. That's not acceptable. So for those of us who are out here doing this work, yes, somebody has to speak up and say, this matters, and you don't get to say that it doesn't. I mean, nobody gets to say that it doesn't, no matter where they are or who they are.
I just have to double down on one point that you made about you telling the story of your generation that's emerging. And understand this, that it is part of the arc of America, and that the America of the founding documents is going to be measured by the wellness of the Black people. So we are the children, grandchildren of slaves and former slaves. The promise of America in our founding documents is not going to be realized until Black people are protected, the outcomes, and all of what it says about pursuit happiness and all of that is going to be measured by us because we've been the least. So I have to chuckle sometimes because the language that's being used about, what's happening with our politics and the rigged system. Well, tell that to my father who never went to an integrated school, or my grandfather who had a good job working in sanitation, but he left the farm and did his best, but he was born in 1909. So, his father was someone, was born in, I think, 1884, something like that. Or probably, anyway, point I'm making is that, we're talking about history that's not really all that distant. So the barometer of America being what its founding documents promise is based upon Black people being the measurement of it. So your generation, is going to tell us whether or not we are there or not. And I think the answer right now is that we're, so keep telling the story.
I would say courage is key. And leaning back into history, Ida B. Wells, during her time, they burned down their shop, burned their press up, but she refused to be silenced. And I think we have to recapture that same spirit and decide, I'm gonna keep saying it, and I'll find a way to say it. And I think it requires a great deal of courage and a work that we all have to do to decide, who am I? What do I believe in? What do I value? And I'm hoping that more enough people like you will stand up and say that, that the truth matters, and I'm gonna keep saying it. And if they burn down this, I'll find another way. And that's what she did. And she refused to accept the narrative at the time, based on what people were telling her. She went and she found the truth. She dug deeper, she found truth. And I think you all have to embody that same spirit. And so I encourage you really to think about that.
How you all doing? My name is Savannah Scott, and my question for you all is, as a Black panel, are any of you interested in learning about the most original and authentically inclusive story that has proven to captivate the hearts and minds of people of all different ages, ethnicities, socioeconomic backgrounds, and even mental and physical capacities?
They don't.
Yes, indeed. Hello, everybody. Again, my name is Savannah Scott. I'm the youth and co-founder of the E-Athlete. And essentially, the E-Athlete is a story brain. We tell stories of people like myself for different mental and physical capacities to help inspire the youth and the rest of the world to do what it is they're called to do and be their highest and best selves and believe in themselves to overcome the adversities that they face in their lives. And it actually started off as a film that my brother wrote while he was a senior here at Morehouse College. He was in the C-10s program. And when he turned it in, Professor thought it was so good that they actually sent it out to Hollywood, and he got offered for the script multiple times, but none of the offers were including any equity attached to any of the deals, and we wanted to make sure we were keeping the authenticity of the story, so he and I decided to produce it ourselves. And since then, the film has turned into a whole movement, and now we do things that we call like our E-Athlete experiences, where we go into schools and community centers, youth centers, and go and talk about our motto, capabilities over disabilities. So we go and show them our film. We talk about capabilities over disabilities. We actually have a novel that was recently completed and is cleared online. And so we go and talk to them about that and help inspire the youth to, like I said, do what it is they're called to do and be their highest and best selves and believe that they can. Because, a lot of narratives and stories that are put out there today are to make us feel like we can do something, or that we're not evil, or that we need to be like this person to be successful in life, and that we can be successful just being ourselves. And what we're all about is inspiring the youth and the youth inside of us all, so that we can do it, and that we can be our highest and best selves and achieve the dreams that we have. So yes, indeed, that is the e-athlete, and I appreciate y'all for giving me a moment up here.
I like this. So where's we find you? Instagram. Give me your.
So our Instagram is the_e_athlete. Our novel is in the bio, but we also we sell them online, but we also sell them ourselves. So if you want to just get them straight from us, you can DM us on Instagram, and we can talk about how to get you a book. But yes, indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you. I see Erin taking notes.
I'm looking.
She's resourcing tonight before I get a call soon. Yes, I have to come back to it.
Good evening to you all. My name is Jaden Jarrett. I'm the junior communications major from Louisville, Kentucky. And I was wondering if ask you all, there was a relation to Elijah's question that he asked earlier about the transition into journalism into digital media now, and what's the journalists and storytellers do about the increasing emotional attachment with the media? I feel like there are a lot of different outlets to produce media and to put it out there and tell your stories now, that a lot of people simply just don't care or care to even read into it because of how much brain rot is really on social media now, how much is just in our media. And I don't know from a personal lens how to grasp even small crowds of attention on my social media to care about what I'm talking about. So what do we do about the basically going lack of care for the stories that people are trying to tell?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's real, right? And on the other side of the pandemic, frankly, which I think has contributed to what you're talking about, I think there is also an opportunity. People want to be in community. So remember that, right? And folks are looking for people like you and the message that you have. Now, the algorithm being what it is, that can also make things challenging, right? Amplifying your content, getting the people in your networks, ask them to share what it is that you are doing, because that helps to kind of raise what you were doing in people's timelines. That's important. But also, yeah, I mean, I think sharing with people content that you trust, content that you feel is relevant. There's not enough people doing that, because I mean, sure, somebody might see me on MSNBC, for example. Not everybody's gonna see me on MSNBC, right? But if one of my friends posts something on Facebook and somebody that's their friend, I shouldn't say Facebook in front of here because I'm just dating myself, but whatever. Instagram, TikTok, any of these platforms. If somebody is sharing something that somebody else knows and trusts personally, that is how. There still is that community, and that is something that absolutely very much still does work.
Yeah, sharing in that way is a powerful endorsement. In a subscription business, and we convert people, I think, in larger numbers when someone takes a piece of our journalism and recommends it. I read this at the HAC. They send it, people click through, they go through. If you hit a paywall, oftentimes the fact that someone thought enough of it to share it helps. But to Erin's other point too, about being a discerning consumer of news yourself, it's chaos out there, right? It's like in this room and everybody, I got the mic now. If all of us had the mic at the same time, we were all talking, trying to make a point, you couldn't make sense of that. So you have to be, I think, a good discerning news consumer yourself. And I think it just depends on the topic. I think as a journalist, there are places you can go where there is vast audience and expertise based upon something that might be of interest to you. If it is your local community, there are places to go. If it is a top, I don't know what that might be, if it's business or if it's entertainment or something like that. There are places to go, a community that you can help build. So I think with what digital provides us is the ability to build broad community and to go deep on topics. And I think those are the places to kind of find all this. Thank you, Law.
Yes.
I can elevate, I can comply. Well, here you go.
I want to your point that you made earlier, Professor Carr, G. Aaron, and also speak as Field, when you talked about the example of Jimmy Kimmel that we saw last week, and he saw the American public respond with the lashing of wallet of Disney. And whatever question comes around to Joy Beid's situation, I've seen some of the conversation for around on social media. It just seems to be a wall that's there, where people said could connect Jimmy Kimmel directly to Disney and could cancel there's a friction. But there was no such answer for protecting or defending or standing up for Joy Reid. So when you talk about how the Black media has always been there for us, and it's time for us to stand up for Black journalists and Black media, my question as of just a member of the Black public, what is it that we can do? Where are we missing the mark here? And when you talk about how we've been here before, we've seen these things before, well, what did they do before? We know they marched, and I guess there's been a public consensus that we're not marching anymore, I guess. So what is it that we do now? And specifically, I'm curious about the economics of it.
Sure. Here's what I would say. Black America did show up, right? The day of Joy Reid's last show, Black people turned the TV off and they turned it back on. I don't know a Black person that's watching MSNBC right now that is not, if they are watching it, we're still pissed about the Joy situation. And if they're not watching it, it's because of what happened with Joy, right? So Black America was very vocal that this was not acceptable to us that this happened, right? That they were very upset about that happening, that they believe that she should still be on here speaking truth to power, right? Where are white people in this moment? Where were white people for Joy Reid in this moment? White people showed up for Jimmy Kimmel. White people showed up for Cracker Barrel. And Cracker Barrel is back on track, okay? That took a hot minute. Where are other people standing with us? We are 13% of the population, right? When white America is angry about something that happens, they are still the majority in this country. And when they decide that they're going to protest something, they're Target boycott. Why is it on Black women to be boycotting Target, and that's it? White women go to Target. I see them every time that I used to go there. I don't show there anymore, right? But when I was there, I certainly saw all kinds of folks at Target, and yet we are the only ones that are being asked to say no. Shouldn't everybody be upset about Target turning away from diversity, equity, and inclusion? Why is it only on our community to say that that's not acceptable, right? Like, if the country is not rejecting the attack on Black folks, the attack on women, the attack on LGBTQ folks, if the country is not rejecting that, that is why we're not seeing the traction for some of the causes that are only affecting specific communities, as opposed to causes that are seen as being harmful more broadly.
Hello, my name is Lillian Green. I'm a first-year political science major at Spelman College from Baltimore City, Maryland. And my question is, in a world where people nowadays don't have capacity or to afford to think about issues that you write about, they're more global or among their own backyards because of how they're being targeted in their personal lives, that they don't know how to put them on the table, they don't know with their resolution, but how do we write about these issues more intersectionally so that they can be encouraged to care? Thank you.
Speaking as a journalist, I think that the important thing for the approach is that we're connected to the world. So politics is local, And it's just an example too of how a direct conversation. So yeah, the aftermath of what happened to George Floyd, there was this wave of wrecking and a lot of fake sound. Some of it was performative, some of it was, a lot of promises made that weren't kept. But, the thing that I think that took a local moment that became an international moment, the thing is that I think locally, our communities, we need to understand where we sat. And so here's what I'm saying is that all politics is all. So being able to understand who your sheriff is, who your police chief is, what are conditions in the jail, what those lawsuits look like. That's the first place you go. I mean, is there a track record of abuse? And is it racial tone? What is the hiring like? Are they, hiring people? And is your state one of those states where police officers who get fired can take their problems from force to force, community to community, where there's no real accountability to weed out problem officers? So what I'm telling you is this, is that anytime there's something happening in the world, there's probably a local story, and there are local stories that can affect the world. So as you think about being a journalist, you think about that old story, and best Carr is one who wound up some best journalism I read recent year was what was going on at our school boards, because those were local stories that told us a lot about our patient. And so it's being able to understand the moment, to frame it properly, and to know exactly, and do work to know exactly how these things are connected. One of the things, journalists, that we can do for people when you're talking about that understanding component of that, is that the dynamics of power is something the journalist has to study. And we have to explain, because we have to explain accountability, but straight lines to it. But also interest. I mean, is there a payoff here or there? Why am I motivated to either act or not act? Those are the dynamics of power. So in explaining that stuff, those are things that your local school board is doing, happening in city councils, happening in county councils. But, the local world sometimes is connected to those things. So it's having that kind of understanding. So to your point, it is a challenge for journalists to make people understand how what they're doing locally relates to the world, and what's happening to the world, how it translates locally. And that's the role of journalists.
Absolutely. I mean, making the macro micro for folks. And I think now more than ever, with so many people paying so much more attention, there are people that are paying attention kind of to what is happening increasingly, but they're also trying to connect the dots to understand, what does this mean for me, right? So, maybe, ask person doesn't really care what tariffs, don't even know what tariffs are. Don't care what tariffs are, but if you say, hey, this is why your groceries, somebody who's worried about the price of groceries, right? Or government's gonna shut down, what's that gonna mean for you and your community? What does that mean? How is that going to affect you directly? Like, that is the role of a journalist. And for us to also be bringing our lived experience to think about, what are the people in my community? What is it that they care about as it pertains to this issue? They may not understand, but it is to Leroy's point, our job to help them to understand why it matters to them, or why it should matter to them, or how they will be affected by this, and maybe what they can do about it.
Yeah, hi, I'm Ron Thomas. I'm associate professor of journalism in New York. I'm also the founding director of the journalism program here. And I wanted to actually direct this to Dr. Morgan Field, because this is the second year that the IWL Society has been here at Morehouse. They're located in the leadership building. And I don't know many students know that you're here, and also what you can offer AUC journalism students. You talked a lot about the courage today, and I think investigative journalism, I'm wondering, how can you help students develop courage, and also what's different about being an investigative reporter, and what different skills does that require, as opposed to the sort of basic fundamental skills that a reporter would have?
Well, to address the issue of what the society does and how perhaps students in the AUC can access what we do. We do have a variety of programming. We host workshops and boot camps, but we're also in a position where we're able to do some tailor-made stuff specifically aimed at AUC students. So, you know, we've got to be working with Professor Carr and others to try to develop some things. I think one thing that we have coming up, we're going to be doing like a resume review, because we do an internship program every year that's aimed at college students, where we place students in major newsrooms, including the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. And so one of the things we do want to see is to see more students from HBCUs get those opportunities, but it does require a certain set of skills that are associated with investigative reporting. And so in terms of data and knowing how to go a little deeper into the reporting process, that's part of what the society tries to do in terms of educating students. And certainly we are open to ideas and suggestions of ways that we can be of help to professors in the education process.
I will also once again plug the 19th fellowship. It is the Francis Ellen Watkins Harper Fellowship. It is open to all HBCU alumni and past attendees. It is a one-year fellowship. We pay the salary of an entry-level 19th employee. That is not a little bit of money. You also get 401k from day one, and you get 100% of your benefits covered. That is 100% health care covered. Tell your mom and dad. It's important. But we also immerse you fully in our newsroom. We have 3 fellows who are focused specifically on editorial, and then we also have an audience fellow and a product fellow. We would love to see more applicants out of the Atlanta University Center, including Morehouse. We have folks who participated from Spelman, from Carr, and we are now just welcoming our 4th class, but we will be welcoming, taking applications for our 5th class in the spring. So if that is something that you are interested in, we would love to see your name as an applicant, and hope to welcome maybe one of you in the fall next year. So we take 5 a year, and like I said, it's a one-year program, and at the end of our one-year fellowship, we work very diligently with you to help you find your next opportunity beyond the 19th. So.
I got to plug the AGC 11 internship program. So I think we had a dozen this past summer. So we do rolling internships throughout the year, but we have a big parade.
AJC intern.
Yes, yes. See, you can be an AJC intern, and you can Google work. Right? Yeah, exactly. But if you Google AJC internships, we've got a page there. I don't have committed the deadlines to send read, but you need to be at $500. So if you're interested, the summer internship is the one that has, of course, it's the longest period, because it's also long. It's full-time work. You get to sit beside guys like your Suggs, who's sitting back here, and he with someone you lost a mentor, young folks that quit your work. So like you get paired up with Ernie, you're gonna go work. We'll just watch Ernie work. You'll be doing work.
You will.
You will be doing work. So I have I'm really proud of the program, and we've done a pretty good job of having people be the AJC and help fix significant work in lots of places, including AJC.
Hi again, my name is Emily Kay, sophomore Pesky, Arts Media at Carnegie University. I actually have another question. How do we encourage more Black people to get involved in media to tell these stories and prevent more erosion in sunny line of Black journalists?
Well, let me just say this. You know, that you come to a place like Morehouse or Spelman or any college CAU center, there is an understanding that you're gonna walk out of here and you gotta go get beat. And right now, our business is a little bit unselfish. So we're just talking about internships and fellowships and things like that. It is unselfish. But there is a path, and so it's gonna take a commitment. I think a community of journalists who kind of coming at this at the same time is very important. because what I've seen is that people come in or in league with other journalists. They tend to do a pretty good job at working among each other, helping each other out, and understanding kind of navigate what's going on. I would say that anyone who wants to be in this field needs to have some mentorship. Mentorship is very important. Mentorship leads to advocacy. So I have mentoring relationships with lots of folks. It just means I've gotten old all of a sudden. But those mentoring relationships, what they allow me to do is to operate two ways with those goals. One, they talk it through, I can be here for it. But if I need to advocate for them, I can do that now. I've been a mentor to a lot of folks where I talk it through. There are fewer people that I'm supposed to be happy for. Here's why. That advocacy part is earned. It is earned. But know that there's somebody talking about you in the room that you're not in. That's where, that one advocacy is something that is that can help you. So get some mentorship. That's going to help. But find your tribe.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, I am not sorry that came from a journalism family. I did not know that this is what I wanted to do with my life, but I figured that out when I was in college, right? And it's because I am nosy as hell to learn about different things. I have short attention span, so I need to cover a different thing how can I learn about something different every single day? Well, you add that up and you get journalism. And then add to that, I get to tell the stories of my people, and I get to go to places and spaces where people who look like me don't always get to go, and ask questions on their behalf, and I get paid to do all of that. Like, what better job could you possibly have than to do that? And to stick a microphone in somebody's face and I have to hold them accountable for something, sign me up, right? Sign me up. So that happened for me in college. But of course I had no idea how to do that once I figured out that was what I wanted to do. And then shows up my student chapter of ABJ. So I show up at a chapter meeting and the rest is literally history, right? I say this is what I want to do, and these folks wrap their arms around me and push me forward and tell me, that I can do it. So I think your point to the erosion of Black voices, Black faces in journalism is important because, I'm from Atlanta, right? Every single station in Atlanta had a Black anchor on the news. I didn't understand that there were places in this country where there was not a Black person in an anchor chair until I went to an NABJ convention and I went to the city and I'm like, why is this white person why are two white people sitting in an anchor chair? I don't understand what's going on right now, right? Like, why are the Black people only out in the field covering? No, that is not what happens in a place like Atlanta. Like, you understand that journalism is something that Black people do, and it's something that Black people can do, right? So even just being here and seeing that this is something that is a path was valuable to me in a way that I would not even realize until I became a college student. But that is something that you see here, that you were able to take advantage of here, people who look like you, who can encourage you. So when somebody is thinking about doing this, you have people that look like you who will tell you that you can do it, right? Even if you are curious. The local chapter, the Atlanta Association of Black Journalists, meets here twice, the second Saturday of every month at noon at WSB. Anybody can come. You can become a member, a student member, and you can participate in those meetings, and you can meet people, and they will let you shadow them, and they will, talk to you about opportunities. And that is so important to figuring out if this is the path for you. But yeah, be encouraged by folks who will fight this is very important, and that's why we have to make sure that those folks are still here.
Our last question here in the middle.
Oh, are you actually one of the things about Thomas or Biden? I'm actually alum Morehouse. I'm actually employed by Morehouse for over 26 years now as a coach, and have the opportunity to work with these great students every day, and what I do, and listening to them now and listening to you all. One of the things that concerns me is how often, and we speak about Ms. Reed's scenario, how often it appears that we do not back our people like we do. However, we spend a lot of time, I think, to making sure that we include everybody in our journey and our challenges. We'll include everybody in ours, However, when it comes down to dealing with ours, like just read, it appears that we don't. Do you think it's just because people don't support us, or the power structure of the media actually blocks it? And in my brain, I think it's a little bit old. You know, I think that we do support it. Others may not support it as much as we, support theirs, like in the Kimmel. And I do think it's a large part of the major part of the media blocking what it may appear to be a lack of concern or respect for what's happening to us. So I would like to hear your view on that.
Doja, I think you're making a good point, and I think that is why it matters for us to make the case to Black America for why our journalism matters, for why our voices matter, and for why we should all stand up. It should not just be Black journalists standing up, right? When something like that happens to one of us, it should be Black America standing up and saying, no, this is wrong. This is one of our voices. We care about this voice. It matters that you have taken this voice away, right? I think you have seen that a lot with not everybody in Black America who care Nazi was, right? That they find out what happens. Oh, Black journalist of the Washington Post, what's this? What's going on? Free speech? What did she say? Oh, she said this on Twitter. Well, that doesn't seem right. I don't like this. They may not know all the particulars, but they know, and they are setting on some of these platforms that is not right. They're canceling their subscriptions to the Post because of it, right? So we know that. And then obviously as NABJ, when we are speaking out, we are saying, yes, our membership is concerned, but we also know that Black America is concerned about this. And that is why we are speaking out, and that is why we are asking Black America to stand with us. That matters, right? And it also matters to say this to the leadership of these institutions. What we know, look, I don't know what our government is going to do in terms of how susceptible they may be to pressure or shame at this point. But some of our institutions are still susceptible to pressure and shame, and therefore we will pressure and shame them, right? And try to get them to do better, and hope that they want to do better. And say that if you want to do better, we're here to help you try to do better. But you also need to know that what you are doing is not a good look for you, it's not a good look for democracy, it's not a good look for journalism, and the eyeballs of Black America and Black journalists are on you, and we are watching to see what you are wanting to do next. Like, that matters for us to say that out loud.
I think one thing we have to realize too, or I started thinking of my working this way in recent years, that it may not necessarily be privileging. That your efforts may not be recognized in real time. But it doesn't make it any less important to it. It's for the record. It's for the record. It's definitely not for the recognition. So it's, we will look back on these times and the ways that we reacted and the way, I mean, how many, before it says 100 years to recognize Wells? Is what she is. Frausto still had proper recognition. We still say the Atlanta Daily World was the first leafy Black newspaper. It was not, but it was not. It was the Wilmington Naked Record that was burned down in the 1898 insurrection and for the editorials of Howard Manley. Right. So, we're working in service to the descendants and powered ancestors, and correcting the record. And it's important work no matter what. I just want to thank our panel. Look, we're gonna view lights out with the ancestors if we don't wrap up, and you don't want to be in here with the lights out. If you've ever been in here by yourself with the portraits, it's an experience. No, you don't. Not even the two of us. But thank you so much for coming out, for sharing this wisdom. And there was one thing, yes, we do have gifts for you, and I know Leroy has shouted out Ernie a couple of times. I did not I saw her when I came through the middle. Blaine Alexander, NBC national correspondent, was sitting here at a middle table. Professor Vicki Harris is an incredible documentarian, and I'm looking at Professor Kim Ford had an outstanding panel earlier today. She
was covering entertainment industry. We were having some of the same conversations about the intersection of diversity, social justice, all of those things. My point in pointing folks out is that what you need is in this room.
Yes.
It's a start, and it's in the classroom, it's in the buildings. Come see us, come take the classes. You also had Clark Professor Camilla Whitaker was in here, Ann Hill Bond, who's a historian and writer with capital B. So don't lose the moment in these rooms, and we do have another journalism league session coming up. What's our next one is tomorrow at Thursday at 12 o'clock. Ernie is a part of that, as is Mike Jordan, who's the editor of UATL, who attended Morehouse, and Joel Wicker, who's an amazing.
Y'all don't want to miss that.
Yeah.
We're good.
Yes. So don't miss the opportunity. We have your back with here with what you need, and thank you so much to each of you. Thank you.